A larger, more muscular goblin leaps. Oh, is it a hobgoblin? Leaps out of the hole wearing a monster skull as a helm. He wears chainmail armor along with dented breastplate. He has a long axe in one hand and a short sword in the other. He takes a look at the goblin corpses strewn about and shouts something, certainly a curse, then strides out in front of the other. His eyes full of hate, or maybe it's just annoyance. Who can say with goblins? They've always looked a bit on the edge to you the few times you've seen them now. Azazel says something, making you turn to see her nod to Jackal. To your surprise, she then collapses into the dog knight's arms. Does she faint, you wonder? The goblins yammer, and one lets loose a yelping laugh. You tighten your grip around the hilt of your sword, preparing to draw. The larger goblin with the monster skull helm convulses for a moment, then grins in your direction, showing a mouthful of chipped fangs. "I'm the chieftain of these fools," says the large goblin in common. Neville's tongue. "She didn't faint, it's just more possession, you think. I wager it's her favorite trick. She is known as the Binder of Souls," says Egra. The chieftain turns to the other goblins and shouts something in what must be their tongue. They blink at him, clearly surprised. After this moment of stunned silence, the goblins speak back to the chieftain. The Borg joins in with his snarling guttural accent. Meanwhile, Jackal has picked up Azazel's unconscious body up off the ground, is now cradling her like a baby. "Binder of Souls, you say? Should I be insulted that she did not try to possess me?" "She has not tried to possess me. Not insulting, but grateful to me. Your friendly godling. Azazel probed your mind for possession just minutes ago," says Egra. "However, after the first time we met this demon, I took the liberty of fortifying you against the soul projection. I will not have my champion's mind inhibited by anyone else." "The goblins offer us an alternative exit," says the chieftain, nodding to you and Jackal. He then eyes you specifically. "Time to leave, that is, unless you would like to be left behind like last time. You must be referring to when Azazel left you for dead in the lair of the House of Rude here." You shake your head. "No, I shall tag along." "Be sure to make yourself useful then," says the chieftain, "and keep that damn Alathian blade in its scabbard if you know what's good for you." The succubus-possessed chieftain leads the way back into the hole. There are what sounds like some protests from the other goblins. Maybe they're wondering why they're backtracking, maybe they're wondering why they don't kill you and the others. You ask Egra to translate, but she isn't interested. She only says that Azazel's goblin speech is much better now that she's in the mind of the chieftain. Although most of what she's saying is still boring, maybe it's for the best anyway, since if you knew what they were saying, you might be even more anxious. As you walk along in line, you stay just ahead of Jackal, not because you feel like he will protect you, quite the opposite, but because he's carrying Azazel and doesn't have a free hand yet to draw his sword and kill you. Plus, any goblin or warg that wants to attack you from behind will have to go through him. Fortunately, the dwarven concoction you put in your eyes is allowing you to see in this unlit tunnel. None of the monsters with you seem surprised by your dark vision. Oh, they're not surprised? For some reason? I guess they don't really know much about him. I don't know. Not far inside the dugout goblin tunnel is another warg, although this one has no rider. Upon seeing you and the non-goblins, he has a great deal to say in his snarling voices. He lunges at you, causing you to grab the hilt of his sword. The chieftain leaps in between and shouts in goblinoid, getting the pony-sized wolf under control. Just then you see another massive monster behind the warg. This one is covered in black pus, has no eyes. Covered in black fur, has huge claws, a pink snout, and no eyes. Is that a fucking... what is that? A fucking mold shrew? What is it called? I think it's called a mold shrew or something like that. Neville, "Scrot, what's that?" you shout. Several goblins laugh and one points at you while making a face. The chieftain leans over to see past the warg and crackles. You could call this a giant mole. He says, "A pet used for fast digging, not something for you to wet your oversized trousers over." Hey, that's no mole. You can't tell me that monsters live off of insects. You call back to the laughing goblins, trying to keep the defensiveness out of your voice. "Do not waste your time speaking to them, for they do not understand common," says the chieftain. "In fact, they are surprised that I certainly can." He raises his eyebrows conspiratively. What the fuck? Yeah, she says that. And then, in fact, they are surprised that I certainly can. Oh, that's because, okay, so she's possessing the chieftain. So the goblins are surprised that why does the chieftain know common all of a sudden? "You're an authority on these goblins?" you ask. She delves within the mind of her host, says Egra. "That would explain why you defend me from her possession," you say. "You're not protecting me, you're protecting yourself due to what I know about you. Those dwarves the dwarves you stink of would love to get their sausage fingers on one of those. So the chieftain, nodding towards the giant mole. Move on, maggot, growls Jackal from behind. Being so focused on the giant mole, you haven't realized you're holding up the line. You continue on, keeping close to the wall. You give the warg and mole as much distance as possible as you pass them. The chieftain gives a series of commands. One goblin snatches the mole by its snout and guides it to the wall. The mole begins digging, this huge claws scratching through the compound clay, the sound I heard earlier, you think. Apparently their mission is to dig into the castle, says the chieftain, nodding through the mole. I ordered them to dig there to keep them busy. The devil knows where they will end up. Suit me fine, you whisper. You don't want to be accompanied by that big creepy mole, and few less goblins in your party is a bonus. Unfortunately, the majority of the goblins, around 40 by your count, stay with you, along with the 2 wargs. Part of you takes comfort in the escort, but mostly are just very aware that Azazel possessing the chieftain could have you slain with a single word. Pretty much. Chieftain leads the way through the tunnel. The ground is soft in some places, where freshly dug earth and crunchy in others. I don't know why would he use crunchy. I mean, you could have used gravelly or something, but crunchy in others from newly shredded gravel. There are also mounds of feces here, and they're most likely belong to goblins who simply defecated as they dug. You're careful to avoid these. The ceiling is low, so much so that the mounted goblins is forced to dismount from his warg. The possessed chieftain moves swiftly, for looking over his shoulder to check on Jackal and the precious cargo he carries. Gods, I could end that succubus right now, you think. You could unsheath your sword and cut her unconscious body in half before Jackal could react. Are you sure? Says Egra. Trying to be nonchalant, you look back at Jackal, who is currently glowering at you with his red eyes. In addition, 2 goblins are watching you from both sides, just behind and to the side of the demon knight. Both are loaded crossbows at the ready. The chieftain must have given them orders to watch you and guard the Azazel bodies. Is Azazel testing me, you wonder? In any case, you're not sure that destroying the body would be enough. Maybe she can just stay within the chieftain indefinitely. It turns out this newly dug tunnel is not that long. Soon it opens into the large chamber, or you expect it would be large if it weren't mostly full of mounds of excavated soil and rock. The underground city, you whisper. My tribe, the Noble Cavaliers, found the city 4 years ago, says the chieftain. Noble Cavaliers, you say, confused. A rough translation, the chieftain says, waving a clawed hand at you. That's how they see themselves. Who? Oh, these goblins call themselves Noble Cavaliers. 4 years with goblins crawling beneath, you whisper. This does not speak well for the city authorities. Worse than goblins, says the chieftain. The undead have recently come. We lost many warriors before we sealed off that hall. Chieftain halts and is silent as his large eyes roll up for a moment. Demor's Hole. The undead are in the direction we are headed, he hisses. This will not be such an easy way after all if we dug through. Rather than finish his sentence, he stomps towards the exit of the far side of the chamber. You want to ask for clarification, but he's shouting orders in Goblin. Follow him closely, hoping you're safer near the possessed chieftain than Jackal. Okay, the chieftain leads you all out of the chamber with the excavated dirt down a wide hall. This hall must be an artery for the underground city, as it is intersected by many sides, halls, and debris, including collapsed rock from the ceiling, has been cleared to the side in places. Your party hasn't gone far before 4 goblins emerge from a side hall. One of them is limping, another screwed armor is blackened with soot. The spear of the limping goblin is stained with blood. All 4 goblins halt in mid-stride, stare alternate between you and Jackal. Finally, the soot-covered goblin steps forward and speaks. The chieftain says something back, and soon voices are raised. Chieftain points at the yelling soot-covered goblin and barks a command. Both wargs charge, scattering goblins, and you also leap to the side to avoid being trampled. Wargs rush past the one in the lead, snatches at the soot-covered goblin in his jaws, cracking bones and eliciting a painful scream just before his cries cut short by the other warg biting down on the goblin's head. The wolves snarl at one another as they pull on the small body, stretching it, then finally ripping it apart. The remaining 3 goblins run for their lives, screaming and yampering. You press against the wall and keep your distance from the wargs with their clicking claws and the spewing blood. The chieftain rolls his eyes and motions to resume. You and the rest of the party march on as the warg lingers to scarf down the share of the goblin. Party is silent now. You keep checking over your shoulder. More than one set of large eyes are set upon you, including Jackal. Anxiety wells up within, making you turn back to the chieftain and say the first thing that comes to you. How fares the young lass, Phobe? The chieftain turns his head to the side, his eyes swiveling to regard you. Safe in the castle. You left her there, you blurt. You suppose she would be safer here, says the chieftain, motioning towards the monster behind you. I suppose not, you say, regardless of the fact you used Phobe to spy on me. I rather like her. She has been through much. I hope for her things turn. Silence, hisses the chieftain as he suddenly halts, forcing you to nearly trip onto him. He shoves past you, shouting a few words in Goblin, and walks swiftly over to Jackal. The Dog Knight turns Azazel's body over. The succubus limp arm flops towards the floor. The chieftain rummages through the satchel hanging off Azazel's hip, pulling out a small glowing crystal ball, peers into it. Several goblins gather around the chieftain, clattering to each other in hushed tones. Oh, they're impressed, says Egra. Now they think their leader is also a shaman blessed by Mugloshesh himself. Mugloshesh? You wonder, God, that goblin hold dear, says Egra. Have you no education? The goblin's pantheon was not top of the mind in the streets I grew up in, you say. Despite all the stinky goblins and the pointy weapons, you looking closer, you move in closer, try to get a look into that scrying ball. From this distance you catch a glimpse of what might be Phobe. The hair seems right. The scrying stone clouds over the clear to reveal on the scene a jumble of fire and writhing bodies of all sorts, men and monsters. The chieftain turns his back to you, now facing Jackal. You can no longer see the stone. Meanwhile, the goblins continue to babble and whisper. The chieftain shouts at the goblins as they fall silent. Jackal and the chieftain speak back and forth in the demon tongue. What are they saying? You ask Egra. Why can't you give me the ability to understand like you have before? Sometimes it's best not to know, else how will you find the courage to go on? First of all, saying that does nothing to bolster my courage. And second, have I not demonstrated courage countless times to you? Egra sighs. Azazel is crying on the surface, rather ugly up there. A great deal of killing, rending, and otherwise uncivilized behavior. She and the Baron are discussing how to get to the Temple of Eternal Love, but they seem to be a little lost. Succubus doesn't actually have a scrying focus up there, so the spell is taxing her on, and more whining and complaining than is dignified for denizens of the abyss. They must be very close to one another, as emotionally speaking, to be so open about the frustration. Rather a straight translation rather than your dubious interpretation, you say. Egra says nothing. Finally, the chieftain stows the stone back in Azazel's satchel and strides forward straight at you. You bow and step aside as he takes the lead. Okay. The possessed chieftain leads your party for only about 100 meters more through the underground city, and then through what appears to be a recently bashed in hole in the wall. Though the hole wafts a nasty familiar stink. Neville's Court on the sewer again, you think. The chieftain leaps down the short drop with a splash. You take a deep breath and clamber down into the water and muck, sloshing after your leader. You breathe strictly through your mouth as you continue on. Even with this precaution, the foul air is almost enough to make you gag. Small pair of eyes appear and disappear, giving you also a glimpse of fur and naked tail. Rats, you whisper. Hopefully your large party with 2 wargs will scare them away. Looking back, you see Jackal has slung Azazel's body over his shoulder, high up, presumably to keep her long hair out of the calf-high foul water. Meanwhile, the goblins are up to their upper thighs. They don't appear particularly bothered by it. Aside from the sound of sloshing water and the heavy breathing, you can hear muffled shrieks and thumps coming from above. You're obviously closer to the surface now. You were in the sewer like this not long before we first met, says Egra wistfully. This must be very nostalgic for you. Nostalgic for you, maybe, you say. How did your Lathian priest die again? Tripped and fell down the sewer grating? Not tripped, but slipped on some horse manure, says Egra with a chuckle. All those prayers to Aletheia could not save him from one very bad step. So, legitimately, that's how he died? I thought it would be like some sort of like some sort of conspiracy of some reason, some bullshit like that. I actually never even thought about like how the fuck the Lathian priest get the fucking medal or whatever, the fucking symbol. Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, what is the origin story? Like, what is the first item that she was planted into? Was she planted straight into this medallion? And how many owners did she have before our boy showed up? 2, as far as we have seen, but maybe there were more, but who knows. More accurately, Aletheia could not save him from you and an undignified, even comical end, you say. As you remember, comical had been the word Kriya had used. She could not believe in a high priest of Aletheia could die in such a way. Little did she know who the real culprit was. Do you miss her so, as Egra, obviously delving into your thoughts. You're distracted from Egra and her taunts that by tiny eyes ahead. A rat is scampering towards you along the narrow ledge, bordering the water. Thankfully, it is a regular sized rat. Is it the rat suicidal? Can he not see or smell the wargs? Chieftain shouts a word and the party shouts. Is that Drala's fucking mouse or something? Chieftain shouts a word and the party stops. He shouts another word with a raised hand and everyone falls silent. Now the sounds of the battle above are closer, sounds of churning water and high-pitched squeaking. Suddenly around the corner to the tunnel appears a writhing mass, a wave of rats sprinting over each other in their haste, their incisors teeth visible as they scream. Rats are in all shades of brown and black. Although most are normal size, plenty are of the giant variety. This wave of panicked vermin is rushing straight towards your party. All the goblins are shouting, so this obviously isn't something normal to them.